just getting started, I think, is kind of the hardest part, because once you do, you start to get into a flow, you start to move along better, and it's just sort of going from ideas to actually making a story. Like I would sleep at 7 in the morning, I'd be up all night writing, and I would go to sleep, I'd wake up, write for a while, get tired, go to sleep, wake up. You are having to constantly market all the time. But there's so much marketing, there's so much advertising. There's a give and take of what do I want to put because it's important to the story, a character or a motif, and what do I need because the story needs to work. And I planned the whole events of the book based on what the solar system was like, and then realized that I had made a big mistake.
Hey everyone, welcome to On Tap, or alternatively the Orbital Media Podcast, depending on which platform you are watching this in. My name is Chris, and I'm not an expert, just a guy who enjoys good beer and good conversation. Today, I am joined by Travis Stecher. Travis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Travis Stecher. I'm a musician and author based out of Los Angeles.
Now, Travis, do you enjoy beer?
I do, very much.
Good. Well, that's a plus. We're already drinking some, actually. If you can see, this is an 805. And what will be happening in this episode is I will be talking to Travis about his work as a self-published author. He wrote a book, you can see it on the table here, called DILATION. It's an excellent science fiction book. If you're interested in science fiction and sort of very, very interesting thought experiments about the evolution of human civilization thousands of years in the future, please stick around in this episode. We will be talking about this and also what it means to be a self-published author, and perhaps how you yourself can do it if you're interested in that kind of stuff. All right, so...
cheers.
Oh yeah, so cheers. Yes. All right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Travis, quickly, if you could just kind of introduce yourself, slightly more lengthy intro.
Sure. So my name is Travis Stecher. I'm a self-published author and musician in Los Angeles. I have a degree in math, which I use for pretty much neither of those. And I've been writing in a more professional manner for about the last 6 years or so.
Now, you've written a book called Dilation, which we're going to talk about in a second. But first, I'd like to talk about how you came to become a writer. So you said you studied mathematics in UCLA, but you are, in fact, also a self-published author. What was your journey like, switching from mathematics to creative writing? Very disparate fields.
Yeah, they're very, very separate. Well, I was doing math because I was always good at math. I loved math.
Yep.
And, I enjoyed studying it at school. And when I graduated, it was, the middle of the recession, and there were not a lot of jobs. And one of the things that people didn't want to hire were mathematicians to do analysis. And I did a job where I was doing math, and I didn't like it a lot. And I tried to transition to a different job down here, and kind of went through a bunch of weird stuff just to pay the rent. And at a certain point, I just decided that I wanted to do things that I really liked doing. And one of those was writing.
Okay.
So I just sort of decided that it's something I was going to start doing more. And
okay.
Snowballed.
Okay. And you said, when would you say you started writing? Or you sort of decided, okay, I'm actually going to give this a try and try to, sit down and write a book, let's say?
Late 2015, early 2016.
Okay. And before then, had you had sort of an interest in creative writing and things that? And okay.
Yeah. So, sorry. When I was in school, we do all the writing stuff you do in school.
Sure.
You have to.
Yep.
But I took a lot of elective ones just for fun of creative writing because I like to do it. I didn't get really credits for it. Not a lot of math degrees require you to take creative writing.
That's
I did it for fun, and then I did my own writing, like short stories again, just for fun. Just sort of thing I've always liked. Even since I was a kid, in elementary school, I always liked writing stories.
Right. Nice. So you started sort of 2015, 2016, actually giving writing a go. Yeah. What was something you found maybe challenging about starting that process? Or was there a challenging aspect to switching from math to, a math focus to I'm going to do creative writing now?
Right. Yeah. One of the things also, I'm more, I think, of a storyteller. I am a writer, but I like storytelling. And I think writing in books and all that is a great way to do it because you have a lot of flexibility, but the writing aspect of it isn't the thing I'm really trained at because I was a mathematician. We're not known for linguistic grammar and all that. So so I kind of had to try to learn some of that, but we do have machines that do that for us now. I think the hardest part is really just starting.
Yeah.
Because you get all these ideas and you get tons of ideas from different aspects of different stories and which ones would work with this plot, which ones would work with these characters, which characters do I want? And it's just sort of a bunch of crap you have on the ground that you're trying to then figure out how to build it into something. So just getting started, I think, is kind of the hardest part because once you do, you start to get into a flow, you start to move along better, and it's just sort of going from ideas to actually making a story.
Yeah. Okay. And did you develop, or do you have sort of a creative process of some sort? So this would be like, do you write during certain times of the day? Do you like listening to music? Do you sort of like, oh, if I'm compiling characters, I have to think about it in a certain way? Or like, what does your creative process kind of look like?
My process, ideally, when I don't have other stuff I need to do, is whatever I feel like doing at that time.
Okay.
And it's actually kind of interesting because during COVID, I got to do this for a little bit where I didn't have any schedule set or anything like that. And I basically I slept whenever I got tired. It was all times of day. Like I would sleep at 7 in the morning. I'd be up all night writing, and I would go to sleep. I'd wake up, write for a while, get tired, go to sleep, wake up. And my sleep schedule was ridiculous. I wrote all the time. It was the most productive I've ever been in my entire life. It was perfect. Because I guess one of the things is I realized that I'd try to go to sleep during COVID. I'd go to sleep because I had to, but I didn't have to.
You weren't tired. Yeah, it's like, what am I doing? Yeah.
I'm like, I'm laying in bed for like hours trying to go to sleep because society said I was supposed to. But we're in COVID, so I'm like, I just get up and start writing.
Right, yeah.
So once I got into that groove, I'd work like, I don't know, like 16 hours a day. I never got tired. It was ridiculous.
Oh my God.
It was perfect. Yeah. Now, with all the stuff I have to do on the side, I bartend a few nights a week and all that kind of thing. I found that I do a lot of cafe writing. And I'll go to I try to keep local, small business cafes.
Yeah,
and I'll get coffee and I'll put on headphones to just sort of laser in and try to take care of a task for the day.
Right. Okay. Nice. Now, I want to talk about self-publishing, right? So you're a self-published writer. You've published this book. What we hear this term self-publishing kind of thrown around a bit, and I certainly hear it. What does self-publishing actually mean?
So it would, technically be any publishing done by the writer of the book. So when the author is the person who is producing it to market, whether or not they're using contracted workers or not, as opposed to traditional publishing, which is when you send manuscripts to mega publishers or even small ones and have them decide what they want to do and then work with you to decide how the book is going to get finished and where you want to market it to. They do a lot of the post-writing work. There's also a thing now called hybrid publishing, which is when you, the author, are producing the work, you're publishing it, but then at that point you start to bring in an indie publisher to do maybe short runs or limited series, to do some of the marketing, to take some of the burden off of you. It's capitalism. It all ends up to how much money do you want to give them to do some work for you?
Yeah. And in your case, when you, when we talk about the book, we'll get into your, process of getting that done. But when you started to self-publish, what were the actual steps involved?
So the first one was just learning the space. And for a long time, I wasn't even sure that I was going to self-publish. Originally, I think like most authors, I went into this, I'm going to do it like the old way, where I'm going to send a manuscript and we're going to have it in every bookstore. And that's sort of more the fantasy, not necessarily the reality. And when you start to look into what's involved in both, you start to learn how much control you have to give up. And really what you're doing when you're traditionally publishing is you're selling your book. You're saying, I'm going to give you this book. You're going to give me a couple $1,000s and then a percentage. And then you do whatever you want with it. And that was what turned me off of it. So then at that point, a lot of it was just then focusing my research into, what do you actually have to do? Because you have to format the book. You have to decide who's going to print it, where you're going to distribute it, and just starting to learn every aspect of it. Whenever there's something I didn't know, I looked it up and I tried to find an article about it. I had to try to find an article towards the end. I had to be very careful that they were from after 2020 because there were a lot of these people who were like, here's how you do it. And it's 2018. I'm like, okay, well, the world doesn't work like that. Anymore, so we have to change this.
And so that was doing the research on, like, you format the book, and when you're saying formatting, you're putting the actual text in.
So you're talking about actually you have to look and say, okay, what margin do I want to put on the left? What font do I want to use? Do I want to use a serif or a non-serif, and why would I use that? How many characters on a line? How many lines on a page? That's normally a publisher has formatters that work for them. They're not familiar with that.
They do that stuff.
The first book, when you're self-publishing, you have to learn all that, and now I kind of know it, and it's easier the second time. Everything. To the page count, to how you put the front matter, the front matter and back matter, which is all the stuff you read before and after the story. Bibliography about the author, table of contents, how you format all of that stuff.
And then what about cover art? How does that?
Right. So generally, I mean, you can do yourself depending on what you want.
Sure.
I liked having the idea of it being a very unique cover, so I hired an illustrator.
Okay.
I gave them a very specific mock-up, like here's what I want it to look like. I designed the ships and all that. And I wanted them to be the things that I made.
Yeah. Okay.
If you wanted to do a more simple cover where it was, a smoking gun, and that you could technically do that yourself.
Sure.
But
Okay.
generally, you hire an illustrator
to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay. What would be something that you found very surprising getting into self-publishing that you, because I know very little about it. Like, what would be, I guess, a challenge that you faced self-publishing that you didn't expect? I mean, other than
it's marketing. It's not like you figure out where it's going to go and you get on the platforms. You are having to constantly market all the time. To the point where I've actually stopped for a while because you don't get as much bang for your buck when you have one book.
Yeah.
Because every dollar you're spending, you're going to get maybe one transaction. The more what's called a backlist.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's so much marketing, there's so much advertising, and it's constant. I mean, there's never an end to it. As soon as you stop selling books.
Yeah. You said it's better when you have multiple books to do marketing.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Just because there's a sort of an additional possible sale for that marketing dollar. So I did work in e-commerce a little bit, so I had some familiarity with it. But you have a certain return on your ad spend. So for every dollar you spend on marketing, how much revenue you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so you spend maybe $5 on marketing, you get a sale, and that sale nets you $3. It's not great. If you have another book, they'd be more likely to also possibly buy that next book.
Yeah.
If you have 3 books.
You know what that means.
No. That means
you know what that means.
Good, I was getting thirsty.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Please finish, and then we'll hear. What we'll do is we will pour this. This is AleSmith. Oh, wow. This is a less well-known, but still indie California company. This is a nut brown English style brown ale. I saw this in the Bevmo and figured it's from California. It's on the maltier side. Travis requested maltier beers. I'm a big fan of malty beer. Yeah,
it was all hops all day, every day. I got burnt out.
I'm not the biggest fan of people. If anyone has watched the channel, they will know I'm naturally not the biggest fan of IPAs. Right. But
I enjoy good IPA. I just don't like the fact that when I drink an IPA, everything else tastes like an IPA for the rest of the day.
Yes, that's very accurate. Well, anyway, cheers. How is that?
That's really malty.
That is a very malty.
A lot maltier than the NFI. Wow.
It's very, very nut brown and biscuity, and it's got some little weight to it, not too much, but just
a little heavy.
A little heavier, a little on the heavier side.
The nut's actually pretty pronounced in it.
It is, yes. No, it's a very nutty, malty, brown ale. Yeah, no, it's good. We got our timer's going. Yep. Okay, so please, yes, continue with.
So basically, then you sell one book. And you get, maybe you spend $1 on marketing, you get 90 cents back for that book.
Yeah.
But then there's a possibility they might buy another book.
Right.
And that might get you another 50 cents on it for that dollar. Okay. So even I'd say 2 or 3, it's a big difference because you're getting an extra maybe 20 or 30% for the same marketing value. You don't have to market every book necessarily. Right. Marketing each book sells all of your books in some amount.
Got it. Okay.
And that's kind of why I've eased off marketing now too, is I'm focusing more on just writing more so that the marketing value will be
higher when you have a sort of a compendium of novels that you can sell. Speaking of novels, I want to talk about this book. So I read this book. I thought it was absolutely fascinating, and it really made me think about what I would consider thought experiments regarding what would happen in 5,000 years to humans, right? Or like if we did run into aliens, but there was stuff involving them being too far away, like what does that mean in terms of things? So for the people who don't know about this book, who haven't read it, would you like to tell them very quickly what Dilation is?
So it's a 50s kind of themed sci-fi story. It's a lot of tropes from the 50s era sci-fi. Basically, is an alien invasion or a first contact that goes poorly, and humanity gets marked for extermination. So knowing that was going to happen because of the way time travel works, or traveling through time works, that it's not instant. Yeah. We send people into space at different speeds throughout all of human history, so they could all come back at the same time to defend Earth from extermination.
Yeah. Okay.
Using properties of special relativity.
Okay.
Which is the big focus of the book, is that concepts of special relativity, where the faster you move, the slower time moves for you.
Right.
Or how time moves relative to an observer.
Yes. Okay. And so that's the basic premise. And then without ever giving too much away, is there anything else you kind of want to flag as, I can in a second talk about what I found interesting.
Yeah,
but
so one of the big things is that the story was also, it's an alien invasion story, but really the story is about humanity.
Yeah.
Right? The story really is about people and humans and what we do to destroy ourselves or to try to stop destroying ourselves. And the sort of speculation of what would happen over 10,000 years to society. Would we rally behind it, or would we forget about it like we do with pretty much every problem that's ever existed?
Yes.
And I always said that the biggest piece of fiction in this book is the notion that humans survived for 10,000 years to begin with.
Yeah. The thing that I found so fascinating about this is I've always been very fascinated by the past and history and tracking through human history and looking at how long recorded history is, which is give or take roughly only about 5,000 years.
Right.
That's all of recorded human history. If we go to basically ancient Sumer, kind of ancient Egypt, ancient Sumer, the absolute earliest is somewhere around 3,000-ish BC, whichever system you want to go with. That's half the amount of time that you've covered in this book.
Right.
And we think about how much humanity
Actually,
is...
that you mentioned that because I had to think about that a lot, is how far back does that go?
How far back does that go? So 10,000 years, that is functionally, if we're going in the past, that would be like the development of agriculture. In terms of how far forward you are going in this book. So for me, the biggest, I think, fascinating component that was running in the back of my mind was, if we went that far out in history, or that far out, in time, because it's not history, it's time. Our future history, right? Like, what plays out? Like, because we think, a decade from now, maybe 100 years from now, 500 years from now, can you even imagine what things will be like? That's a 20th of the amount of time covered in this.
Right.
How did you think about that? The idea of the timeline and, and I, as I said, in a future episode, I'd love to talk to you more about this. Like specifically, we just dive in on this. But how did you think about that, building that out, that timeline of 10,000 years and...
So a lot of different ways. So part of this is that all the fiction I write is generally called speculative fiction.
Yes.
It's called sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. It's all called speculative fiction. A lot of it's just what if, what happened.
Right.
And so a lot of factors. I kind of thought about, first of all, there's also the story writing element of we need the plot to continue.
Yes,
on.
Of course. Yes. Yep.
But that having, looking at how far back some of these things go and how quickly we forget little things. And maybe that we wouldn't forget about it, but most people would forget and only a few people would remember.
Yeah.
Or they'd have a distorted understanding of what it was when you think even just back to the 90s or the 2000s, where things that we lived through and remember that people are almost like gaslighting. You're like, it's different. You're like, wait, no, I was there.
Yeah.
We forget things so quickly.
Yes,
but,
we do.
Like, more to your point too, 10,000 years in the past is before written history, really.
Yes, completely before written history.
And part of that is that we now have an ability to record history that we didn't have in the past. And there's so many little ways that you could keep information. And you as a historian know that there's the first degree source. What is it called?
Primary sources and secondary sources. Yes, a primary source is written by people who lived during that time and were around and do.
So you are an expert on this.
As Dan Carlin says, he describes himself as a historical enthusiast. I would say the same thing. I do have a bachelor's in history, but not like some fancy historian guy. But primary source written by people who were there at that time, around in that environment. Secondary source written about that thing after the fact by people who are later on, historians who are not there.
So that a primary source would be more likely to exist or evidence or something written by a primary source would be more likely to exist in some little fashion. But also that there would just be giant shifts in society based on technology changing. We focus so much on, and that's a whole other topic that we could get into this point is this whole idea of AI. And so much of that is that we change ourselves to technology more than technology changes us. How does that affect society? And some of it was. And I think originally the idea of 10,000 years was more, I liked, the look of it. 10,000 years in the future. I almost shortened it at one point because I was really trying to go out and how long would it take for us to terraform Mars?
Yeah.
Or how long it takes to colonize Mars? How long would it take to get an efficient colony with resources? How long would it take to terraform a planet? And I'm really like, okay, hundreds of years, thousands of years, and then go.
Yeah.
So there's a whole kind of a progress. You basically start at step one and you go, how long for this? How long for this? How would this change? And you literally step by step go through the whole timeline and think about what would happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I found myself at many points, reading in sort of the middle quarter, maybe, like the second quarter of the book, third, where we're like, oh, we're at the year 3000. I'm like, the year 3000? I'm like, what's going on in the year 3000? That's 1,000 years on from now.
Yeah,
and then I'm like, wait a second, we're only a tenth of the way to where we're going to be.
Yeah.
And thinking like, how much is going to change in that time? And, again, you have a whole phase without getting into the details of sort of a whole rise and fall and rise again of human civilization as we know it, all within the span of about 10,000 years.
Which happens in our
which has happened. You could maybe even argue multiple. You could argue that depending on what part of the world you're looking at, but let's say the West, arguably we've had it like twice.
Greece, Rome?
Greece, there was one before Greece. There was the ancient world, which you got like ancient Egypt and Sumeria and all this. Then there's something that I think more because the internet people are learning about called the Bronze Age collapse, where basically it was just everything gets wiped out. Okay. This was like this is like 3,000 years ago. So this is the Iliad and the Odyssey are speaking about this idea actually of things that happened, but then the concepts get transmuted in a weird way. Okay. The suggestion is the Iliad and the Odyssey were based on real events that happened in this ancient world, but then there was this massive collapse, like a full-on dark age.
Right.
And remnant ideas of that real event made its way through the dark age to come out the other side as the Iliad and the Odyssey. And then after that dark age, you got things like Greece and Rome. They didn't exist beforehand. That was the concept. You had like ancient Egypt and like the Hittites and all these cultures. And then you have a second dark age, which is probably the well-known one.
That was the
Dark Age with the fall of Rome, right? So in so let's say in 5,000 years, if we're talking about roughly Western-ish technology, stuff, we're looking at two full-on dark ages with collapse, and then something else comes up.
Where all the information prior is pretty much gone. Other than weird remnants
or stuff that's like buried in the ground, and then people dig it up in like the 1930s.
Right. You get archaeologists like, what does this mean?
Exactly.
Maybe this is some weird thing. And like, no, it's just a chair.
Exactly. So that idea of like there might be a whole phase of collapse, and then like what information survives. But the timeline's so long, you then have a whole second building of cult. That was for me. It was like, this is really interesting stuff.
I like that,
Really interesting stuff.
It's funny because it's weird to think. I'm trying, thinking back. So I came with the idea for this in 2015. That's when I started, and I started writing it in 2018. I would say I started writing it a while ago. I stopped for years because life got crazy and I didn't have time for it. So I wrote the first half of the book, and I didn't write it for years. And then lockdown is when I finished it. And so I'm trying to remember some of the process, because a lot of the things too, there's a give and take of what do I want to put because it's important to the story, a character or a motif, and what do I need because the story needs to work. And so it's hard for me to remember exactly why I did some things. One of them, with the timeline too, I was trying to play out this whole invasion thing, and I'm literally looking at the best information I can get about what the solar system looks like. And I planned the whole events in the book based on what the solar system was like, and then realized that I had made a big mistake. And so I'm looking for...
Which is?
I changed the direction of where something would be to the relation. So I imagined the solar system it'd be coming from this way, but it would have been the south, like the bottom. Fuck, it's all backwards. So I'm looking for different eras of our solar system that were close enough that I didn't have to rewrite stuff. Because it was really strict on no, I want it to be as accurate as I can make it.
That is where that is where those planets will be
best to our
at that point in time. Yes.
And I wound up having to fudge it anyways. So I think some of that was also part of extending, because I literally looked at what's the closest I can make, what's the earliest I could reasonably make this and feel like it was an accurate representation of that rise and fall of creating this technology, losing it and all that. And it was I was 6,000, but the 6,000 years, it just didn't have the ring.
It doesn't have the ring
that the
10,000 years has.
I know that was part of it sometimes, but even 6, like you said, even 6 is a long time.
That's
a huge amount of time.
That is beyond all of recorded history even now.
Right.
you know.
But even as people think like us expanding to other planets and all that, like talking about colonizing Mars.
Yeah.
And that's not a thing that's on the new frontier. Like we could maybe get people to hang out there for a while, but even like The Martian is one guy surviving, and that's well out of our tech right now.
No, exactly. That's that's decades and decades
and so
down the road.
People living there as like I was born, and that's
that is thousands of years down the road. Knock on wood, we don't wipe each other wipe ourselves out until then. So, what is it about writing that you enjoy so much?
I like the storytelling. I like the stories just in general because I feel like they're good ways to tell points. I mean, that was like tell a point that you don't really get in nonfiction. I mean, that was originally stories was all fables, and they were boy, incredible. Here's the whole story, and there's a moral to it. And the moral is that this is a bad thing to do, or this is a good thing to do. And there's always and nowadays, I think because we've gotten so used to having more complex stories, it becomes looking for role models, or here's what here's a good role model for healthy masculinity, or here's a good role model for overcoming imposter syndrome, which is a very big motif in here. And so those kinds of things, it's like, well, imposter syndrome is something that everyone faces. It's a normal thing. No matter how good you are, everyone has it. I actually remember hearing about a story of Bill Hader and Andy Samberg that they told once, where they were auditioning for something on SNL, and they're in an elevator, and they met each other the first time, and you saw one of them had a ton of props, and he's like, oh my God, I don't have any props. Should I? Why do I have props? I didn't think I'm props. And then later on, they're talking about it. The other one said, that's so funny, because when I was in the elevator, I'm thinking, he doesn't have any props. Why the fuck do I have props? We all do it. And so that's a big one in this book. But in general, that's what fiction allows. And I like to say that you use fiction to tell truths and you use nonfiction to tell lies.
Okay.
Because with the understanding that everyone thinks the thing in a nonfiction book is true, you can make shit up and people think it's true. Whereas in fiction, we all know it's make-believe. And within that, we put storylines that resonate with us.
What kind of stories, both, having read Dilation, they're clearly, genre-wise, it's sci-fi, right? But at a deeper, maybe thematic level, what kind of stories are you drawn to naturally?
I tend to read thrillers. So even this book, as a sci-fi book, the pacing of it is very much like a thriller. I'm a big fan of Crichton, Ludlum, and a lot of I got a little away from the political thrillers, but I do enjoy those. I like the technological thrillers. I like the pacing of it. I like the up and down. That gets a little fast, it slows down, constant cliffhanger. So I tend to read those kind of books, and I think most of my writing reflects that. I do like them to be speculative. I like the what ifs. I enjoy it.
Oh no!
All right,
we are at
kill this.
Kill it. All right. Next up, we have Callie Creamin. This is Callie Creamin Vanilla Cream Ale.
Okay.
This is a California brewery. The theme today will be entirely California craft breweries. 805 is pretty good size, but it's still a craft brewery.
Probably as large as you can get with it still in craft.
Yeah,
that I think has got that.
Exactly. We're not doing Sierra Nevadas in this episode, but yes, it's sort of about as big as you can get while still being counted as a craft beer. So.
I like this beer.
Sorry?
I like this beer. This is a good one.
Yes. All right. Well, cheers. This is the first time I'm having it, so. That's lovely.
Really good. They make
lovely.
I've had they have an orange creamsicle one.
Drinking this now, I could imagine what that. I mean, that could be pretty sweet. Pretty
it's very similar to this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which this one is sweet, but it's not sugary tasting.
No, exactly. I mean, the thing about this that I really, really like is I can taste a creamy, smooth, sweet vanilla flavor to the beer, but it doesn't feel like it's a. Sometimes you get flavored beers where you feel like you're drinking something, and it's like this is beer that they just injected some other flavor into, and it's not.
It wasn't part of the brewing process.
This is not part of the brewing process. They just threw it in later on. This feels like you have this smooth, creamy, rich, full vanilla flavor, but it was part of the brewing process.
Right.
That it's rolled in really nicely. This is doing it for me.
It tastes like it's part of the beer itself.
Yes. This is really doing it for me.
I love this. And they have a bunch of different flavors. I've only had a couple of them, but they're all really good.
Yeah, no, I gotta look out this brewery and see what else they do. I've heard of Callie Creamin, but I don't know if I've ever ordered beer by them. So you're interested in thrillers. You're interested in, stuff that's a little fast-paced. What other, if you don't mind sharing, what other projects are you working on currently?
Yeah. So I also, similarly to this one, I took a bit of a break on it. I was, the first thing I did when I published this book was found a job.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
You have to get the day job, the night job. And then I kind of got just overwhelmed and burnt out, was doing work and all that. So I took some time off, but I've almost finished my rough draft of a book called Venthrali. Which
called
is
what?
Venthrali.
How do you spell it?
Venthrali. Venthralli.
Venthrali. Okay.
That is the name of the last colony in the universe. So this story, and I don't want to give a ton of it away because it's not gonna, but it takes place in the distant future after all the stars have exploded and the universe is in a state of near total entropy.
Okay.
It's about the last colony of people who survive in this tiny colony, absorbing all the heat they can, trying to find all the energy they can just to survive while being hunted by the only other species that has existed.
God.
It's so that's while this is a 50s kind of theme.
Yeah.
This is a 70s style.
Okay.
This is the space is dark and cold and unforgiving and everyone dies.
Yeah.
It's more like a cosmic horror kind of a book.
It's very not sci-fi, but I'm thinking like The Road. Cormac McCarthy, The Road, just like. God, that is a bleak story.
Dystopian. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's sad.
I watched the movie and I'm really happy I watched it during the day because otherwise we would have just been not happy that night.
I saw the movie. That was with
Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah. I don't know if I did.
Yeah.
The book is super depressing. That's
I don't know. Yeah, those can still be very meaningful. Like the film The Road was like, I'm glad I saw it, but I mean, it's a trip. What do you find most not challenging, but like what do you like the most and the least about writing, about being an author?
The most I like getting the stories. I like having a story that's new. So I like being able to create characters and getting some of myself in those characters. All the characters, all the main characters in this book have parts of me in them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a nice way to put life into them, and that's kind of a rewarding part of writing. The capitalist parts suck. All the stuff you have to do to make it.
The what parts?
The capitalist parts.
Oh, the capitalist
parts. All the stuff you have to do to make it a business and all like that's all.
Yeah.
I hate all that stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoyed a lot of the publishing stuff before the marketing, but after the writing, I actually really liked a lot of that. I hadn't expected to, but. Before writing the book, I'm trying different fonts and going through and I didn't just say I need a font that looks. No, I went through hundreds of fonts. I'm looking at which one do I just like the look of. Get rid of the ones that are just not applicable. How do I and I looked at other books and I started to appreciate the creation of the book more because I started looking at books on my shelf and being like, okay, how big do I want to make the book? And I look at different books, like which one feels good in my hand, which one, has too many lines or it's hard to read. And so I kind of picked it, and that was interesting. That was fun. I like doing that.
Yeah. It's funny actually that something you just said about character, I've heard in interviews with authors where people will often ask the author, like, which one of the characters is you?
Yeah, right.
And the authors always say none of them. All of them have a little part of me.
Yeah.
That seems to be fundamentally how it works for people. It's
Unless
not
you interview Dante and ask him which
Sure. Or certain, shall I say, wannabe screenwriters who will write screenplays where it's literally just a self-insert and they're just doing this because they really, I mean, some of those.
No hair and a red beard.
Yeah, exactly.
His name was Travis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So sometimes when you read those inserts and you're just like, oh.
But they can be good. I mean,
sometimes.
Dante's Inferno is
a pretty classic. Yeah, it is. I'm trying to remember when I read that. I did read it, but I'm trying to remember when.
And it's fanfic, right? I mean, it's basically
100%.
Fanfic of Christianity.
100%.
A self-insert fanfic. That is one of the most well-known.
That's exactly right. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember reading not half, but like a good chunk of the stuff that we think of as classically like Christian and especially like Catholic Christian is basically just Dante, doing Christian fanfic on here's how hell works. Yeah, I think that is like original Christianity. Hell's very like. There's not, or it's just like, it's not really described in any clear terms. Yeah. It's just like, it's a bad place.
Unimaginable. It's
yeah,
so bad,
exactly. You can't even think about it. You know,
Don Peter's like, well, what if it's like this?
Well, it looks like this, and then Satan looks like this, and he's got a big beard and horns, and he's red, and
before that, in the Old Testament Judaism, there is no hell. It's just no. It's you don't have God. That sucks.
Yeah.
Christianity was like, no. There's a place.
There's a place.
I can't tell you about it, but it's bad.
But it's bad. Oh, it's real bad. Yeah. But what about speaking about the future? What about the future for you and the projects that you are hoping to do down the road, and where do you hope writing takes you, sort of as on a journey?
I like to keep writing. I have some. So when I started this one, I had already 12 different IPs already in different stages.
Okay.
And I actually went through a while of deciding which one I wanted to write first, and wound up with Dilation because it would probably be the most convoluted and complicated to write, and I would learn all the problems that come with writing so that the future books would be easier.
Okay.
But now I've got 20, and I've started to throw some into the it's never going to happen folder of the someday maybe if I get bored. But I have so many, so I want to start getting the time to write them and hopefully get enough of them out so that I can make money on the ad spend enough so that I wouldn't have to do other things. I can just focus on writing.
Yeah.
As before, I'm also a musician. I'm a vocalist, and so I like doing that stuff too. So I like to kind of balance the two, especially if I could do more music to the point where I get to travel. That's just perfect writing.
Right.
I spend so much time, getting to write in at the airport, which I do when I travel. All I do at the airport is edit.
That's great. Yeah.
But I've started adding more to the list of wanting to write than I'm writing, and so that's becoming a problem. So ideally, I'd like to write quicker.
Okay. Are you looking at doing any series, or are you thinking a lot of these as sort of really standalones?
Most will be standalone.
Okay.
I personally like standalone books.
Okay.
And partly because I think that the writing space has shifted so far into series that you're getting what I call paperback exposition.
Okay.
Where you're basically
what does that mean?
So basically, it's where the first book of a series is not a whole story.
Yeah.
It's act one of a three of a story.
Yeah.
But they're gonna end it because then when I before I published this out, people were telling me, you could split this into 2 books. I'm like, I know that. I'm not going to do that because I'm not a D-bag. I don't like it. I hate it. If I read a book and I feel like it hasn't ended and they're just kind of like, F you. I don't want to do that. So I prefer standalones, but I do have some that will be series because they have such large worlds that they would cater themselves to more episodic than serial, though. So being that rather than being an overarching story that takes 11 books to tell, they are individual stories that take place with the same characters in the same world.
Got it.
So less like, so kind of more like the first Harry Potter's, not like the last Harry Potter.
Yes, I was going to say. The early Harry Potters very much had that feeling.
I think of it kind of like like James Bond was very much like that.
Yep.
As opposed to these big, 10-book series that are basically one giant epic, which are great. I know a lot of people who love them because they like to have that same story continue on rather than doing 400 pages being done.
Yes.
As a storyteller, I don't like doing that. I don't like reading them.
Yeah, no, it's sort of like a preference thing.
Yeah.
For me. Okay. Yeah. And I think for me, there's sort of probably the world building element is how into the world am I, and how much do we need to spend time on getting us situated in what's going on here? I think in your case, since it is
Lord of the Rings style.
Exactly. And I think if this were you're just dropping us in, I need some time to get situated because you're starting us off in March of 2023 in the United States. It's like, okay,
we just missed First Contact.
I know. Yeah, it's sort of it's a little easier for me to be like, okay, I don't need to get caught up on any of this. Like, I know exactly where we are, and then you sort of build it out from there.
And the ones that I have planned that will be series. Again, I'm planning a more episodic, just because again, I still want the story to be
sure. Yeah.
But those have a lot of world building, and that can be done over multiple books. But that's better for a series because there's so many aspects of this world you've made, and you don't want to just, I call it the Tolkien dump, where you're just like, hey, first 15 pages, I'm just going to tell you what the world is like. We're not going to get into the story. Alternatively, you can spread it over the course of multiple books.
Do you enjoy world building as simply not a end in and of itself, but just something you like to kick around and think about?
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I constantly write, so I'm writing all the time.
Okay.
And basically, as I get an idea, I'll write it down somewhere. And I have a whole system of multiple things I use to write down ideas and catalog them and sort them. And so a lot of these books I've just been piling ideas together for years. I mean, I took a stock of it the other day, like a couple months ago, and I have like 450 pages of notes for books that have not been made yet. And a lot of that is setting stuff. It's like, oh, in this world, like that'd be a cool thing. That would make sense. But how would they do it like this?
Yeah.
And because I'm doing speculative fiction, a lot of it is just, what would it be like if this world had that?
Yeah.
You know, like this world has magic, but they wouldn't need this tech then, like, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I think, a good mark of, as you get further into sort of, you know, science fiction or, you know, whether it's, you know, fantasy, I stereotypically assume is more, you know, historical kind of stuff. It's like, it's older societies, right?
There's a whole joke in writing groups. It's like, what constitutes sci-fi and fantasy?
Yeah.
So it's like, sci-fi is when there are laser beams and fantasy is when there's magic. Like, there's a lot of jokes about that.
That's exactly, but right, you know, we think about like magic and how if you had that, you wouldn't need certain things. And so like, you know, you get rid of it. Yeah. And I think it's a very interesting thought experiment to get into, kind of like the logic of things and not just thinking, oh, this would be cool. Let's just, I mean, this is how my brain works at least. Or hit the mic there. That's how my brain works. Which is like, rather than just thinking, oh, wouldn't this be cool? I find like if you go through it again and you think, well, wait a second. Logically, why would they do that? Or like, why would they need that type of weapon if they do this?
Exactly.
Or like, and then you think, well, okay, so what if they don't have that? What if they have this other thing? Oh, but if they have this other thing, that'll lead us down here.
Yeah.
And then it actually takes you into much more interesting places.
Right, and that's where all the I think the unique ideas come.
Yes,
because you're really
absolutely.
Instead of saying like that would be funny, like yeah, we all think that would be funny, but what if that turned to this and this, but in this world, and you end up with like a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of thing, suddenly new territory. I call those the woodness, and it's an idea, and a lot of people I think get one of those and then say, I have a book idea. And it's like, well, one thing which is great, it's the starting point though. And there's so many other places you should go with that because wouldn't it be cool? Like, but why would it be there?
Right.
You know, and if you really want it, and you're like, I really want this thing to be there because I think it's cool, awesome, but now build the world around it. Why would it, what reason do you have for that to be there?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So last question before we switch into the final phase, which is going to be the game phase where I make a fool of myself. For people who want to be self-published authors, do you have any advice for them? Because some people might be listening because they're interested in this kind of stuff.
To do your own research. Don't take what other people say, because I got steered wrong a couple ways for things I did that I regretted. But just you have to learn a lot of it. I mean, you have to be prepared to be not just a writer, but a formatter. I mean, you're a publisher. You are having to decide how you want the book to look, where you want the book to go. Do you want to do just ebooks? Do you want to do print? Who do you want to be your printer? Where are they going to distribute to? You have to be prepared to do all of that. And the only way to learn that is to read a lot of information about the space. And not just the self-publishing space, but the writing space. You are a writer and a publisher. You need to do both of them fully. And so it's just, there is a lot of work involved, but to do it properly, I should say. I mean, you can, what we call vanity publishing, which is you throw money at it and just get the book out, but you're not really taking ownership of anything. And so as problems come up, you can't really fix them or address them. So you need to be prepared to be those things. Reading. I mean, it's and if you're a writer, you can't say, I don't want to read. Like, you're a writer. You got to be able to read. There's a lot of information going on the beer.
That was a pretty good timing, I think. That lined up perfectly. All right, so for the last...
You're a pro at this.
I've only done it a couple times. I just, I got that clock over there. But So for our last beer, we have Lincoln Beer Company from Burbank, California, Rail Splitter Red Ale.
Oh, I love Rail Splitter.
This is the last one to finish us off. And, okay, this hasn't blown up, which is good. This is... Sometimes they blow up a little bit in your face. Cheers.
I'm going to go into see what do you think of that one? I never had this in a can. I've only had it once on draft.
Okay. I mean, I like this one too. It's a little, partly because we've been sitting out. I can tell that it's slightly warmer now relative to something else. It's still fine. If this were some really, really cheap lager, that would be not great.
It would, yeah.
This is okay. I can still manage. It's got a slightly more, I don't want to say bitter bite to it, but a little very soft thing that's not just smooth.
Right.
To it.
I think it's got balance, but it definitely has hops.
Yes.
It's an ale. It has hops.
It definitely does.
It does get balanced by the malt, and what are the extra flavors are? I like the. I like the mix of what I like the other flavors. It's a good. I like the palate of it.
Yeah,
I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, it usually with red ales, what you have is you have like really, really minor roasting of the malt that's used. Not a lot, but just like a touch. You almost like I think I might be wrong that it's smoking, but with like a porter or a stout, you're really like getting in there and you're roasting them, and it's like with coffee beans and they get all like burned and dark and stuff. With red ales, I think it's more you're doing a little bit, but you're just like giving a little light little toast, you know, and that's kind of adding a teeny hint,
a little peatiness to it.
Yes, exactly, a little hint of the stuff you might get in like a darker beer,
right.
But it's sort of straddling that line between something that's more of like a, you know, like an 805 or, you know, a lighter kind of ale, and something that's a little bit on the darker side. Yeah.
And we mentioned I'm not a huge stout fan. I can appreciate a good stout, but
that's fine.
I can't do a whole stout. So, what do you think? How likely do you think it would be for an alien species that we encounter to not be carbon based? Because there are some ideas behind it.
That's a good. See, I like this. Is
okay.
Card tricks? No, I don't like doing this. Questions about if there's alien life out there that's not carbon based? Hell yeah. Right. Well, this is something I am going to be relying on you for in terms of asking things like silica, right? I've heard like
that's
silicon is.
About,
I hear that a lot. People talk about silicon-based life,
right?
But I don't know anything about silicon, and I don't know the environments in which silicon would like manifest. Yeah.
And I don't know. That's like you're talking like the chemistry aspect of stuff.
Okay.
I think there is a chemical reason for it, because one of the things about carbon is that it's such a great universal bonder.
So
many things can bond to it. I think silicon has some kind of a similar structure.
Okay.
But to me, right now, when we talk about silicon-based life, I'm thinking more AI, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Like if we build programs, that would technically be a silicon-based life form.
Yes.
But there is also, I think, people have ideas about naturally occurring life on another planet in a different society or a different ecosystem.
Yeah, a different planet. Yeah, different environment.
Based on silicon as an actual organic natural life. I think it might be either.
Okay.
But I don't know how likely it would be for that to happen, because we also have the whole thing where it has to be a certain temperature, right?
Yes.
It has to have water.
Yes.
As far as we know, right? You know. So what do you think about it being like? Is silicon what you're thinking? Like maybe.
Maybe I would need to it's such a coward's answer to say I need to read up on it or I'm not sure, but I would say that it does seem, from the little I know about, as we're discovering more exoplanets and as we're seeing like what's around them and like how do the stars work, there is some really weird stuff in terms of like how the star might exist with the other planets and like what do the orbital paths look like, or stars plural, right? But it does also seem like there might be certain aspects that are more universal than we think, right? So I mean, like I remember reading a Michael Crichton book. I think it was Sphere, which was published in like the late 80s, and they were like, what if aliens exist in multiple dimensions and you can only see like portions of them? And I feel like now that idea of like aliens existing in multiple dimensions just constantly, and not we'll talk about maybe the thing in the book, right? But the idea of the actual creatures themselves, like somehow like not obvious that's true. It could be that yes, they might be weird, but they will still exist within three-dimensional space.
Exactly, yeah.
Because all these stars, as we're finding them in all these planets, they have certain similarities to something in the solar system, suggesting that there are aspects of the solar system that are fairly universal to a degree.
Or at least universal for creating life.
Creating life, yes. You're not going to get so trippy, out of the box, weird stuff.
Like you're going to get because there's also they have like the area they call like the habitable zone.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to get up the planet right next to the sun or the star with life just blooming in 8,000 Kelvin. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you will, it'll be like microscopic little things that swim around.
Yeah.
They're not sentient and they're not building
And they
spaceships.
can't get that big,
Exactly.
yeah.
And they can't get beyond just like little bacteria that swim around in a
Right.
petri, basically a petri dish. And same thing if you've got a planet that's, where Pluto is or
Yeah, it's so
or
cold, but like you could live there,
Yes,
but you couldn't
yes.
evolve.
You couldn't evolve there, right? You're existing as some sort of weird bacteria that
Yeah.
doesn't do anything.
And then you get unfrozen, and you start, and that's the whole.
Sure.
We all know what happens there.
Yes.
It's the thing.
Yeah, yeah, in Antarctica, yeah. But silicon life, really, I don't know because I don't know enough about the chemical properties of it, and I don't know what silicon life would look like, like how it would evolve differently. Yeah,
They'd end up being end up being kind of more like biometal, like
Okay.
silicon. So whatever binds to silicon would, I think, end up being more
metallic in nature.
But it'd be like a living kind of metal, which that's part of sci-fi.
It's very like Terminator-esque.
Yeah,
in a way. Think about it. Interesting.
Oh, maybe that's what happens. That's how it ends.
Metal. So it would be like a creature that has a metal skeleton. Something like that, but also metal would exist in its like circulatory system.
Iron in the blood, and
possibly.
Because you're saying like not knowing a lot about chemistry, like how much of our blood and muscles are relying on specific bonds,
and it could turn out that there are certain elements where it's like that you just can't have that. It just can't happen in the physical universe that we exist in. That you can have a creature like that's living.
Yeah.
But maybe you can't. Yeah.
Well, so like briefly, I mentioned that one. It's an interesting thing because we don't have any examples other than Earth.
Right. Yes.
So there's all the various life. It's like that's so many different ways that it can evolve and adapt, but it's still Earth.
Yes.
And it's Earth atmosphere. So like every life form needs water.
Yeah.
Is that because everything evolved on Earth, or because it's actually essential for water to create life for whatever properties?
Yeah, no, I think we're sort of at that. I mean, speaking of technology we got to develop in order to get to places like Alpha Centauri and to get outside and to see like even in even the local stars, like what's going on there. Yeah, I mean, even if we got there, but we found, there's no life there, let's say, but we still found other planets and we see, what's going on these other planets.
Yeah.
There'd be tremendous.
They have water on
Right. Like they have water. Like, okay, that's a thing that shows up a lot. It's not super rare. So obviously it's things like hydrogen and helium, that's super common. We know that that's everywhere.
Every star is just
has that. Yeah. So certain things, very, very common. But in terms of, I mean, I don't know if there are you aware of other kinds of elements other than silicon that people have talked about as being the potential basis
for life?
Not that I've
seen a lot of. I mean, I think everybody, part of in writers groups, there's all kinds of crazy.
But
I think in what I've read in scientific community with that they've written their speculative shit.
Yeah,
it's always silicon's the one that they talk about. I don't think I've ever seen another like key element, because that's what it always talk about. What would it be instead of carbon?
Yeah.
That silicon, but I don't know if anyone's like, there's totally going to be a hydrogen-based life form. It's just this gas.
It's just a gaseous thing, right? Because that's how hydrogen is,
around
right?
And
yeah.
Those are kind of like those are the two. Is carbon? Well, we know carbon. It's not.
Yes, it's not speculative. We know. Is the speculative the potentially?
But I think perhaps carbon life might exist somewhere.
Right. Maybe somewhere. What else that I can fumble over?
Let's see. So we're going on to the life forms. Oh, let's talk about the key one. How long do you think humanity's got? Real talk, ignore everything I talked about. What do you think humanity really has left in it?
Oh, I think. See, here's the thing. I think humanity has a lot of time left in it.
Okay.
I really do. What I think is the question is humans in a civilization environment.
Right.
That's, I think, the key. Because in terms of societal collapse, right, like the default for the vast majority of time that humans have existed biologically, they've existed as hunter-gatherers. They have not existed in any organized society. So even if any kind of civilization collapsed, I don't think that would do anything to the species. If we're talking about this in a really, really like cold calculus kind of way about like, does the species still exist? Yes. I think, and that would be true.
So now, do you think in that situation though, that people would be able to propagate enough to continue? Because if we're talking about like something like a nuclear fallout, where everyone is dying, and yes, we would survive.
Yes,
but would we survive enough to propagate?
I think that's the big question, which is the only realistic situation that I see where humanity, like the clock is ticking, is probably nuclear apocalypse.
Sure.
Maybe if you had like the most deadly disease in the history of the world, but even then, I mean, like there have been some pretty horrible diseases in the past, and those were just like, yeah, those happen. Like, you know, people keep going on. I mean, it would almost need to be nuclear war, extraterrestrial eradication, or combined with that, like extraterrestrials bring some sort of pathogen somehow that like just kill everyone.
Right.
But if we're talking about anything short of that, even like environmental degradation, species will be completely. I don't want to say fine. That's
interesting because that's I think where people are talking.
Yeah,
about. It's global warming too. You know, because I think at this point we've kind of gone into a sixth mass extinction, just because of how many minor species that we've killed off. That in turn chain reaction.
Yes.
So yeah, how does humanity survive that? Or are we going to lose so many of these base species that we survive in a form of, you know, miscellaneous people who slowly die out over time?
Yeah, my view is, again, not to get kind of like very dark here, but in terms of if we're speaking about this in the most cold numbers, just survival of humans as individuals, irrespective of how many other countless people die, and irrespective of total societal collapse. We are just simply like, we're looking at them like bacteria under a microscope. Sociopathic we're going full on sociopath here. Global warming will not have any effect on the actual extinction of the species. I don't believe it will have any effect at all on the literal extinction of the species.
Okay.
Now, the absolute horrendous collapse of everything we recognize as part of the world we live in, sure, yes.
We'll basically become monkeys again.
Yes. It will revert to something like, if you looked at hunter-gatherer tribes for the 40,000 years, it's sort of unclear like when we want to start the clock on human brain evolution and that kind of stuff. But there's a whole
split off from the
there's a phase where the suggestion is humans are anatomically modern humans, but it's not obvious that they're mentally modern humans. The argument
it's biologically supposed to be like 50.
It's 50 to like 80,000 years, but for sure around 40 to 50,000 years people go by artwork basically. Once people are doing cave paintings, they're like, okay, these people, that's human. They fundamentally understand concepts of creativity.
They are sapient.
That's exactly right. They're sentient creatures. They aren't simply thinking next meal and reproduction. And that's it. So that's it. And that's really like 40, 50,000 years-ish, something like that. In the situation, people would absolutely still survive, but the numbers would be, they would be infinitesimally small. They would be like tens of thousands.
Another link in the food chain.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So if in that sense, Mike, if the sense is how long does humanity have, I would say, again, pending nuclear apocalypse, alien invasion, pathogen probably from outer space, plus aliens that wipe out humanity to a person. We got tons of time. But it could very well not exist in any state we would ever want to be around or live in.
Right.
And
I see that because in my thought of this whole like next extinction thing, if we got to that point, our time would be the normal time of a mass extinction. Millions of years. I mean, the last one was like 2 million years long. People think that the meteor hit Earth and it was like a bullet that killed all the dinosaurs. Like it was 2 million years for that to happen.
Yes.
So even in that situation with like global warming, where we become this sort of primitive sort of man again, our days might be numbered, but it could be millions.
It could mean
which is all right, like you said, way more than we've been around. I mean,
exactly.
That's what was interesting to me is that like humans have only been around for thousands of years, and dinosaurs who are best known for going extinct.
Tens of millions of years.
They got a number. They
tens of
way better
millions of years. Yeah,
dinosaurs
exactly.
survive so much better than humans.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of what I would think, and then you get into weird stuff like, well, would there be human evolution? But if we regress back to hunter-gatherers, maybe there wouldn't be because it's See, I go on all about this all day long.
That's a good book idea for you, though. So it's when humans go back to hunter-gatherer because we go extinct, the next evolution of them
would there be other forms of evolution that happen with
like
humans?
A cousin species.
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, it raises a lot of questions about, I was thinking about the Neanderthals, right? That there's more information about their brain capacity, that they were not stupid, that they were, it seems like, reasonably, like there was basic signs of creativity and all this stuff, but we don't know, like there are no Neanderthals around, right? Like we don't know if they're around. There's a question about like if Neanderthals were around, would our definition of human even be different? And would we view them as just like a different kind of person? And I mean, not that I ever...
Well, like Tolkien.
Yeah, well...
Elves are...
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, I never read the Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones books, but if I remember correctly, in that there's... like in the world building, there is basically in-universe versions of Neanderthals. And they are just described as these like, kind of like hairy, rugged people, basically, who just, they're kind of different, they're a little odd, and they kind of keep themselves, but like, they still have ships, they still trade, they show up, like, they still wear clothes, like, they just, they're not particularly good looking, they're kind of ugly, but like... To us humans, But it's sort of an interesting idea of like, it's the idea of what's considered human is just a little wider, and they're really still viewed as like, basically what you'd count as humans. You're just like, they're kind of like weird,
Yeah, there's something odd about them.
There's something odd about those people, and it is an interesting, question about, this is very like man from Earth type stuff, which is sort of like...
It's funny you mentioned the idea that Neanderthals were a lot smarter than we originally meant.
Yes.
Or at least more creative and expressive. Because, history is written by victors, and it's they were dumb and they got extinct. Or was it just that there were multiple species? And because most species go extinct. And there's more extinct species than extant species.
Absolutely.
And I think we always had this idea that, humans came along, we eradicated them because we're better than them. But I mean, how long did that really take, though? I mean, it was, thousands of years?
It would have been thousands of years.
Tens of thousands?
Like, this is, I know more than zero about this, but I'm trying to go through my dates right now. And
but not like we came along.
Oh, no, it wasn't like, No, it was thousands of years at least.
They kind of died off like most species do.
Yes.
We think of them as being dumb because of that, but they might have been...
Yeah, they could have been smart. It does seem maybe there were issues with just there were never very many of them. They may be... Things about like they might have not been certain good at... They might not have been very...
Drunk?
They might... Hey! That's why we do this.
Yes.
They may have been not very good at certain aspects of maybe group dynamics, maybe coordinated hunting, maybe there's one theory I was reading about, they're actually, in a weird ironic way, they had less perhaps maybe gender segregation, that like female Neanderthal skeletons show lots of trauma on them, suggesting like maybe their women were hunting, but then that was causing problems. Again, if you want to view this as a sociopath, that's not good for raising kids, and so there are a lot of these different things that may have contributed to them kind of going extinct. Though they partly also, as we were finding in DNA, they did also intermix with humans. The human DNA is depending on what part of the world, except for people of sub-Saharan African descent who have zero Neanderthal DNA in their genome. Yep, people of sub-Saharan African descent pretty much zero Neanderthal genome. Yep.
Where did Neanderthals die out at?
Well, because they were living in like Europe and modern day sort of Europe, Middle East, Asia. That whole band, and so people who are European, Middle Eastern, East Asian, South Asian have, I don't know about South Asian, but East Asian, European, and Middle Eastern for sure have like 1% to like 4% of their genome is Neanderthal.
And the other is what's his face?
What?
Oh my God! See, this is throwing through is the guy whose genes are in everybody.
Oh,
the warlord. Oh my God.
Oh well, I was thinking
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's very.
For
like X%, like 4% of the population are his.
Oh, Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They're either Neanderthal. Or
yes, or Genghis Khan. Yes. Yeah. No, it's this kind of stuff like timelines is very interesting. Of like kind of how long is a long time, and I think 1,000 years in the future, long time. Like
Right.
what would happen with that kind of stuff. Yeah. Any other final questions for me to fumble before we wrap up?
What's your absolute favorite beer you've ever had?
Ooh, I gotta go with a Belgian ale on this.
Okay.
Probably. It's one of a range, but there's some of the beers that my dad has, which is probably either a Chimay, a Saint Bernardus, a Pirate, or a Guldendrach, which are these are all Belgian ales. And if you were asking me, like, you gotta pick a beer that you're gonna have in just like a nice glass and drink it, it'd probably be like one of those 5. Okay. So yeah, these are the like 11% alcohol Belgian ales that you get in a chalice.
I've had the St. Bernardus one before.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so those would be I think my pick.
Oh, okay.
That's what I would go with as just
you
like
want the bang for your buck out of it.
I want the bang for my buck. Top shelf stuff. Yeah.
I was gonna try to bring back some Russian River Wine, but it's
okay.
It couldn't hang around that long.
It's all right.
The growlers.
It's all right. Not a problem. Well, anyway, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Once again, the book is...
covered a lot of it. I mean, the stuff we'd cover after this, we'll do something else.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Real FaceTime and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it's available on all the major ones. Ebooks and print on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Kobo.
Great. Yep. The book is Dilation by Travis Stecher. Please check it out. If you like sci-fi and you like stories that really, really get into the sort of existence
hard
sci-fi of both extraterrestrials and also humanity as it exists thousands of years in the future, check it out. Travis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been good. And if you haven't already liked the video or subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so we can continue to make more content in the coming weeks and months. And we will see you next time in the next episode.